From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.
Good day. Radyo Pilipinas World Service can also be heard on shortwave broadcast through the shortwave facilities of the United States Agency for Global Media or Voice of America on the following shortwave frequencies: 15.640 MHz, 17.750 MHz, and 21.720 MHz. I'm your host, Leo Magpayo, and this is Dateline Malacañang. Malacañang is pushing back against assertions from Vice President Sara Duterte's camp that her alleged death threat against President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. was merely hypothetical. The palace maintains the statement was real, intentional, and publicly admitted by Duterte. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said, "The case is not speculative because Duterte herself publicly declared she had instructed someone to kill the President, First Lady Liza Araneta Marcos, and former House Speaker Martin Romualdez if anything happened to her." Castro noted that Duterte never denied making the remark and even described it as something that should not be taken lightly, making it impossible to frame as a hypothetical scenario. Castro also rejected arguments that the alleged threat cannot constitute grave threats because it was conditional. Citing Article 282 of the Revised Penal Code and a Supreme Court ruling in Kaluwag versus the People, she emphasized that grave threats may be committed regardless of whether a condition is attached.
Ang pagbibigay po ng salita na kumausap na siya ng tao para patayin ang Pangulo, ang unang ginang at ang dating House Speaker, hindi po ito hypothetical. Nakita po ito. Hindi po ito gawa-gawang isip, hindi po ito pantasya. Sinabi po ito at mismong si Vice Presidente ay hindi pinapasinungalingan ang kanyang mga sinabi, ang kanyang pagbabanta sa buhay ng Pangulo. So wala tayong pag-uusapan tungkol sa hypothetical. Hindi po yan hypothetical. Dahil mismo si Vice Presidente ang nagsabing, no joke, no joke. At patungkol po sa conditional, alam naman po natin, lalong-lalo na ang mga abogado, nandiyan po nakasaad sa Revised Penal Code, pati po ang sa kaso ng Kaluwag versus People. Akin na rin pong babasahin. Kaluwag versus People ruled that in grave threats, the wrong threatened which amounts to a crime may or may not be accompanied by a condition. Hence, under Article 282, there are two forms of committing grave threats. First, when the implication of the threat upon the person, honor, or property, or the family of a person is coupled with condition. And second, when the alleged threatening act or remark is not subject to a condition. So, ang grave threats ay pwedeng conditional or hindi may kasamang kondisyon. At sa cross-examination kahapon, nakita at naisiwalat din ang maraming bagay. Unang-una, ipinakita po rito ang video ni Atty. Zoleika Lopez at ginajustify ng mga abogado ni VP Sara na ang reaksyon ni Vice Presidente ay patungkol sa di umanong oppression ng House of Representatives kay Atty. Zoleika Lopez na kanyang Chief of Staff. You cannot and you will not justify something if you did not commit any act. Doon pa lang, dahil ginajustify nila yung action nila, at nakumit lamang daw ito dahil sa di umanong pangyayari kay Atty. Zuleika Lopez, dun pa lang po ay may pag-amin na po sa ginawang pagbabanta sa buhay ng Pangulo.
On claims that Duterte made the statement out of fear due to an alleged plot called Operation Romanov, Castro said, it is up to Duterte's camp to prove the operation existed. She pointed out that the National Bureau of Investigation, or NBI, previously asked Duterte to provide information about supposed threats against her family, but she did not cooperate. Castro stressed that invoking an alleged operation does not justify threatening the president.
Sino po ba nagbanggit ng Oplan Romanov? Hindi po ba nasa partido ng Vice Presidente? Hindi po ba siya ang dapat na magbigay ng mga ebidensya patungkol dito at hindi ang palasyo? Siya po ang magbigay ng mga detalye para po magkaroon ng tamang pag-iimbestiga. Binigyan siya ng pagkakataon, sinulatan siya ng NBI para malaman ang mga sinasabing death threats sa kanya at sa kanyang pamilya. Pero hindi siya tumugon. Hindi po kasalanan ni Numan kung hindi magkakaroon ng anumang tinatawag nating existence, yung sinasabing Oplan Romanov, dahil mismo ang Vice Presidente na nagsabi nito ay hindi ito napapatunayan. So, anong gagawin po ng ehekutibo kung wala namang maiimbestigahan dahil walang anumang detalyeng ibinibigay ang nag-aakusa patungkol sa Oplan Romanov? At ang paggamit muli nito ng justification, gina-justify niya ang sinasabing Oplan Romanov kaya siya nagbanta sa Pangulo? Hindi natin maiwawaksi ang pagiging Vice Presidente niya at sa pagiging nanay niya. Ang pagbabanta ay pagbabanta. Sino ka man, nagbanta ka sa buhay ng Pangulo, kahit ikaw ay isang nanay, ikaw ay isang Vice Presidente, walang pagkakaiba yon. Nagbanta ka pa rin sa buhay ng Pangulo.
President Marcos influenced the criminal investigation, noting that the NBI acted under its legal mandate to investigate matters involving the president's security. She described allegations of presidential interference as weak, saying the investigation stemmed from Duterte's own public statements.
Nag-i-insinuate ba siya na mayroong kinalaman ng Pangulo sa pag-iimbestiga patungkol sa pagbabanta ng Vice Presidente sa kanyang buhay? Unang-una po, hindi naman po talaga dapat ma-question ang sitwasyon po ng NBI. Dahil alam po natin ang NBI, kahit wala pa pong pagbabanta, ang Vice Presidente ay under na po ito ng DOJ. At ang DOJ po ay parte ng ehekutibo para ipakita at nag-i-insinuate na may kinalaman ang Pangulo sa pag-iimbestigang ito. Ito ay ang pinakamababa sigurong klase ng argumento. Ang NBI po ay may sariling mandato. Kung mayroong nakita at napatunayan naman po na may pagbabanta mismo sa buhay ng Pangulo at hindi lang naman isang tao, 2 taong nakakita nito, buong mundo ang nakakita ng pagbabanta sa buhay ng Pangulo, ni First Lady at ni dating House Speaker. So, mandato po ng NBI na imbestigahan po ito dahil po ito ay para sa proteksyon ng ating Pangulo.
The Senate impeachment trial formally opened on July 6 following the House of Representatives' decision in May 2026 to impeach Duterte over multiple allegations, including culpable violation of the Constitution, betrayal of public trust, misuse of confidential funds, bribery, unexplained wealth, and the grave threats case tied to her November 2024 remarks involving the President, the First Lady, and Romualdez.
Dateline Malacañang.
Meanwhile, Malacañang said it is hoping the Senate impeachment trial of Vice President Sara Duterte stays firmly rooted in the rule of law, due process, and evidence, even as it underscored that President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. will not interfere in the proceedings. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro emphasized that the executive branch has no role in rating or assessing the Senate impeachment court after its first 3 days of hearings. She said the president remains focused on governance and respects the constitutional separation of powers. Castro added that the palace expects senators to strictly follow legal procedures and decide the case based solely on its merits. She warned that acquitting or shielding any politician despite overwhelming evidence would be a betrayal of the Filipino people. Castro reiterated that the president's consistent position is for all parties to observe the law and established procedures.
Ang expectation hindi lamang po siguro ng palasyo, ng ehekutibo, kung hindi ng taong bayan. Ma-expect natin na unang-una ay tumupad sila sa batas, gawin ang hearing or trial ng ayon sa rules and procedure, at magkaroon ng desisyon ng naaayon na rin sa ebidensya. Para ito naman ay para sa taong bayan, hindi para iligtas ang isang politiko kahit na kung marami mang ebidensya pero ililigtas natin, ito po ay isang betrayal na rin sa taong bayan.
Malacañang could remain neutral when one of the impeachment complaints involves alleged threats against the president. Castro clarified that being hands-off means respecting the separation of powers. She said the executive will not interfere with the Senate's handling of the trial but will respond with facts if issues directly involving the president arise.
Ang ibig sabihin po natin na hindi makikialam at hands-off ang palasyo, ang ehekutibo sa trabaho po ng Senado. Unang-una dahil may separation of powers, hindi po talaga mandato ng ehekutibo na makialam sa magiging desisyon ng Senado. But if the issue involves the President at kailangan sagutin with facts, so, yun lamang po ang gagawin natin. Ipapakita natin at ipapaliwanag natin sa taong bayan kung merong issue about the President, regarding the President, i-update natin sila at ibibigyan natin ang katotohanan.
The Senate formally convened as an impeachment court on Monday to try Duterte over allegations including culpable violation of the Constitution, betrayal of public trust, graft and corruption, and misuse of confidential funds. The trial is expected to continue in the coming weeks as both the prosecution and defense present their evidence.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang says President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has exercised his plenary power in appointing Benjamin Ben-Hur Abalos Jr. as Cabinet Secretary, a role the palace now describes as redefined to bring government services closer to communities nationwide. In a briefing Thursday, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro clarified that no executive order is needed to revive the old office of the Cabinet Secretary. She explained that Abalos's mandate is entirely different from the functions of the defunct office dissolved under Executive Order No. 1 in 2022. Castro says the President's directive is clear. Cabinet Secretary Abalos must ensure every Filipino feels and benefits from government services. Instead of managing cabinet meetings, she says, Abalos will serve as the President's representative on the ground, traveling across regions, coordinating with agencies, and responding directly to public concerns. Castro adds that Abalos's new role involves providing leadership and direction in political and constituency engagement initiatives, reinforcing the administration's push for accessible and responsive public service. According to Castro, President Marcos has full confidence in Abalos's ability to carry out this expanded mission. She notes that the assignment allows Abalos to go around every region and help broaden the administration's reach so more Filipinos can directly experience government assistance. Abalos took his oath as Cabinet Secretary on Wednesday in a ceremony led by President Marcos at Malacañang Palace.
Iba po kasi ang posisyon na ibinigay ng Pangulo kay Cabsec Benhar Abalos. At ito po ang aking masasabi. Cabsec Benhar's appointment is the President's way of redefining the Cabsec position, pursuant to his authority to reorganize the executive branch, particularly the Office of the President. And second, plenary power to appoint. The President has the plenary power to appoint. Okay, and instead of a Cabsec focus on managing the President's cabinet meetings, ang utos ni Presidente kay Cabsec Benhar ay siguruduhing nararamdaman at napapakinabangan ng bawat Pilipino ang mga serbisyo ng gobyerno. And as Cabsec, President Marcos Jr. also directed him to go around the country to represent him and call on the cabinet members to help address the concerns of the public. All these tasks are embodied in Cabsec Benhar's terms of references attached to his appointment. Ito po ang ibinigay sa kanya dahil makikita niyo naman po na ang tiwala ng Pangulo kay Cabsec Benhar Abalos ay buong buo. At kaya itong function na ito ang ibinigay sa kanya para mas mapalawak pa ng Pangulo ang pagsisilbi at makakaikot si Cabsec Benhar Abalos sa bawat rehiyon para mas maramdaman nga ng bawat kababayan natin ang tulong ng gobyerno.
As Palace Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang says eligible government employees are on track to receive their 2024 Performance-Based Bonus or PBB within the year. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro told reporters Thursday that the funding for the bonus is already provided under the 2026 General Appropriations Act, and the Department of Budget and Management may release it earlier depending on the implementation schedule. Castro says the Office of the President has approved the grant of the 2024 PBB after a review by the Technical Working Group formed under Executive Order No. 61, which streamlined the government's performance management and incentives system. The PBB is a performance-based incentive given to qualified personnel in agencies that meet the standards of the National Performance Management Framework. To qualify, an agency must earn at least 70 points under the scoring system outlined in a memorandum circular issued on July 3rd. Agencies that score below 4 in any eligibility criterion will face exclusions. The circular also states that units and individuals, including the head of the concerned office, found primarily responsible for any deficiency, will be isolated and excluded from receiving the fiscal year 2024 PBB. Castro reiterated that the palace expects the bonus to be granted this year, saying it may even be released ahead of schedule.
Ang fiscal year 2024 performance-based bonus para sa mga kwalipikadong kawani ng pamahalaan ay ipoproseso at inaasahang maipagkakaloob ngayong taon. Okay? Baka mas maaga pa, earlier. Ang pondo para rito ay nakapaloob sa Fiscal Year 2026 General Appropriations Act para sa mas detalyadong schedule ng implementasyon, kabilang ang mga target na timeline para sa pagproseso at pagpapalabas ng performance-based bonus. Maaari pong sumangguni sa Item 9 ng EO number 61, Technical Working Group Memorandum Circular number 2026-1 na may petsang July 3, 2026. Maraming salamat.
Palace Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Also on Thursday, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. honored outgoing South Korean Ambassador Lee Sang-hwa with the Order of Sikatuna, rank of Datu, one of the country's highest diplomatic distinctions, for his major contributions to strengthening ties between Manila and Seoul. Ambassador Lee received the award during his farewell call at Malacañang Palace, where the president thanked him for helping steer bilateral relations through a period marked by significant political, economic, security, and cultural milestones. President Marcos praised Lee's service, noting that under his tenure since June of 2023, the Philippines and South Korea elevated their relationship to a strategic partnership. This followed reciprocal state visits and the President's participation in the 2025 Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation or APEC Leaders Meeting in Gyeongju. Lee, in return, expressed gratitude to President Marcos and the Filipino people for the support and hospitality extended to him throughout his posting. The palace highlighted that cooperation between the two nations expanded across multiple fronts. Economic ties deepened with the implementation of a Free Trade Agreement or FTA in December of 2024, while South Korea emerged as one of the Philippines' top sources of foreign direct investments, particularly in semiconductors, energy, and critical minerals. South Korea also played a key role in advancing the Luzon Economic Corridor, backing projects such as the rehabilitation of the Ninoy Aquino International Airport or NAIA, investments in the Subic Shipyard, and the expansion of Samsung Electromechanics in Calamba, Laguna. Infrastructure collaboration accelerated as well, with South Korean support for major transport projects involving railways, airports, seaports, and the Bataan-Cavite Interlink Bridge. Defense cooperation continued to deepen, with Seoul remaining a major partner in the Armed Forces Modernization Program, supplying assets such as FA-50 fighter jets and naval vessels. Beyond security and trade, South Korea remained one of the Philippines' largest development partners, supporting initiatives in digital transformation, healthcare, education, agriculture, climate resilience, and disaster preparedness. People-to-people exchanges also flourished, with South Korea maintaining its position as one of the Philippines' top tourism markets and expanding cultural, educational, and local government partnerships.
Dateline Malacañang.
Almost 10 years since the landmark arbitral ruling that affirmed the Philippines' rights in the West Philippine Sea, a clear majority of Filipinos continue to support the government's response to the ongoing maritime dispute. The latest Tugon ng Masa survey shows that 66% of adult Filipinos approve of how the Marcos Jr. administration is handling tensions with China in the West Philippine Sea. Only 13% expressed disagreement, while 19% were unable to give a definite opinion, a sign, analysts say, of the complexity and evolving nature of the issue. Support for the government's position is strong across all major regions. The National Capital Region or NCR posted the highest approval at 70%, followed by Balanced Luzon at 68%. In the Visayas, 65% of respondents backed the administration's approach, while Mindanao registered 62%. Octa Research noted that the results reflect sustained and stable public confidence in the government's stance, even as incidents at sea continue to draw national and international attention. The group said the numbers indicate that Filipinos broadly support efforts to assert the country's rights, strengthen alliances, and pursue diplomatic and legal avenues in dealing with China. The survey was conducted from April 20 to 24 through face-to-face interviews with 1,200 respondents nationwide, providing a snapshot of public sentiment as the Philippines marks nearly a decade since the arbitral tribunal ruled in its favor.
Dateline Malacañang.
The palace reports that close to 500 government doctors have been deployed to geographically isolated and disadvantaged areas or GIDAs across the country as part of the Department of Health or DOH's intensified Doctors to the Barrios program. Palace Press Officer and Presidential Communications Office Undersecretary Claire Castro said the deployment prioritizes 4th, 5th, and 6th class municipalities, communities that continue to struggle with severe shortages of medical professionals. She noted that the expanded presence of government doctors is a key component of the administration's push to strengthen public health services in far-flung areas. Castro added that following the directive of President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr., the DOH has also simplified and accelerated the process of availing medical assistance. Under the Electronic Medical Assistance to Indigent and Financially Incapacitated Patients or EMAIFIP system, anyone in need can now access support more quickly and with fewer requirements. The palace said these efforts reflect the administration's broader goal of ensuring that essential healthcare reaches Filipinos regardless of location or financial capacity.
Alinsunod sa hangarin ni Pangulong Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. na siguruhing walang patid ang serbisyong medikal sa taong bayan, nagpapatuloy ang paghahatid ng serbisyo ng Doctors to the Barrios ng Department of Health sa panguna ni Secretary Ted Herbosa. Sa tala ng DOH, umabot sa halos 500 na mga doktor ang na-deploy ngayong taon sa mga 4th, 5th at 6th class municipalities at geographically isolated and disadvantaged areas sa pamamagitan ng DOH Doctors to the Barrios o DTTB program. Alinsunod din sa utos ng Pangulo, mas pinadali at mas pinabilis na rin ngayon ng ahensya ang pagkuha ng medical assistance ng mga pasyenteng lubos na nangangailangan. Sa utos ng DOH, kahit sino ay pwede nang makakuha ng medical assistance mula sa kanilang tanggapan sa pamamagitan ng Electronic Medical Assistance to Indigent and Financially Incapacitated Patients o EMAIFPIP.
Was Palace Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro Jr. has dismissed as disinformation recent claims by Chinese scholars alleging that Batanes belongs to China. Speaking at the National West Philippine Sea Summit in Pasay City, Chodoro said the assertions are part of false historical narratives emerging from a tightly controlled society and appear intended to signal broader strategic ambitions. The summit marks the 10th anniversary of the 2016 Arbitral Award, which upheld the Philippines' maritime rights in the West Philippine Sea. Chodoro said the claims reinforce long-standing concerns about China's intention to expand control across the Pacific. He stressed that the Philippines remains firm in upholding international law and defending its maritime entitlements. The defense chief highlighted that safeguarding the country's maritime domain begins with strengthening public understanding and national ownership of the West Philippine Sea, the Kalayaan Island Group, the Exclusive Economic Zone, and the extended continental shelf. He emphasized that awareness must be deeply rooted among ordinary citizens and treated as a shared national responsibility. Chodoro also underscored that true stewardship requires Filipinos to embrace the maritime domain as something to be protected and nurtured for future generations. He said the country must make long-term commitments and investments to ensure that its maritime resources are preserved. He added that maintaining a rules-based international order requires sustained cooperation among like-minded states. According to Chodoro, collective action and shared responsibility are essential to counter unilateral attempts to reshape regional stability for narrow strategic advantage.
Dateline Malacañang.
In other news, the Philippine National Police or PNP says the memorial marker for slain South Korean businessman Ji Ik-ju inside Camp Crame will serve as a lasting reminder of the organization's commitment to institutional integrity and accountability. The marker also honors a victim whose death revealed one of the most troubling chapters in the PNP's history. The initiative aligns with President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.'s directive through Interior Secretary John Vic Remulla to strengthen professionalism and rebuild public trust in law enforcement. PNP Chief General Jose Melencio Nartatis Jr. said, "The memorial reflects the institution's readiness to confront its past while pushing reforms that reinforce transparency and responsible policing." He emphasized that the marker symbolizes the PNP's determination to prevent abuses of authority and ensure that similar tragedies never happen again. The marker will be installed at the Police Community Affairs and Development Group, following a request from Ji's widow, Choi Kyung-jin, during her recent visit with South Korean Ambassador Lee Sang-hwa. It will provide the family a permanent place inside Camp Crame to remember him. The development comes nearly 10 years after Ji was abducted and killed by rogue police officers inside the national headquarters in 2016. Nartates noted that the widow expressed renewed hope for justice after the recent arrest of former Police Lieutenant Colonel Rafael Dumlao III, one of the alleged masterminds in the case.
Dateline Malacañang.
In other developments, the Department of Labor and Employment, or DOLE, is expected to release a resolution this month on the employment status of former Ateneo men's basketball head coach Tab Baldwin. This comes after the second and final classificatory hearing held at the DOLE Central Office in Intramuros. Labor Secretary Francis Tolentino directed both Baldwin and Ateneo representatives to submit their memoranda within 7 days, after which the case will be considered submitted for resolution. The proceedings form part of the DOLE's review of Baldwin's compliance with Philippine laws governing foreign nationals working in the country. The hearing focused on whether Baldwin was required to obtain an alien employment permit and whether an employer-employee relationship existed between him and Ateneo. Ateneo's lawyers argued that Baldwin served under a consultancy agreement and was not under the school's control, while noting that the MVP group of companies sponsored the team and may have covered his compensation. A witness assisting Baldwin said he helped secure an immigrant visa at Ateneo's request and pointed out that resident aliens are exempt from AEP requirements. Dole, however, clarified that under the omnibus rules implementing Article 40 of the Labor Code, resident aliens with an alien certification of registration are still required to secure an AEP. Tolentino reminded employers to strictly comply with legal requirements and emphasized that the enforcement of AEP rules must balance transparency, accountability, and the protection of Filipino workers while allowing expertise from foreign professionals when necessary. Baldwin personally attended the initial hearing on June 29th. The resolution is expected within the month.
Dateline Malacañang.
And finally, the Department of Agriculture, or DA, said it is on track to complete the country's largest post-harvest drying facility network, in line with President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.'s directive to boost farmers' earnings and reinforce national food security. Agriculture Secretary Francisco Chu Laurel Jr. announced that 380 drying systems will be completed for the 2027 wet season, the first nationwide rollout of this scale. Of these, 230 units are already under construction and are expected to be operational by the end of 2026. Procurement for the equipment has been finished, with installation now focused on completing the necessary sheds. The remaining 150 units are scheduled for implementation next year, with the full network targeted for completion by September 2027. DA Undersecretary Christopher Morales said the expanded drying capacity will significantly improve farmers' profitability by lowering production costs and increasing rice recovery. With access to mechanical drying, farmers can sell palay at higher market prices. Based on current yield averages, farmers using the facilities could earn an additional 12,600 pesos per hectare per cropping season, or roughly 25,200 pesos annually. Nationwide, the added drying capacity is projected to generate around 3 billion pesos in extra net income per cropping season, or about 6 billion pesos per year, driven by the price premium for properly dried palay. 2 units are already operating in Nueva Ecija province, and most of the initial 230 dryers are expected to be commissioned before year-end. Once fully deployed, the network will add roughly 1 million metric tons of palay drying capacity each cropping season.
Dateline Malacañang.
Before we conclude our program, Radyo Pilipinas World Service of the Presidential Broadcast Service can be heard over the following shortwave frequencies: 15.640 MHz, 17.750 MHz, and 21.720 MHz. Radyo Pilipinas World Service is also live on audio streaming. Just download Evox PBS Receiver on your Google Play Store or the App Store from your Apple phone. You can also visit our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Just type in and search for Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Kindly subscribe, like, and share our post as well. And that concludes this edition of Dateline Malacañang. For Radyo Pilipinas World Service, this is Leo Magpayo. Good day and stay safe.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.